Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Guide Shack Chronicles. Tonight we got a very special guest with us, my good friend and Ohio's own Jeff Liskay. He's going to talk to us tonight about steelhead, and we're going to talk about the differences between steelhead and Atlantic salmon. So stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this episode.
And here we are, folks. We're sitting here tonight with Jeff Liskay, all the way from Ohio. How you doing tonight, Jeff?
Great, Dave, man. Thanks for the invite.
Appreciate it. I couldn't be happier to have you, man. When I kicked this whole thing off, you were definitely one of the dudes that I said, I've got to get Jeff on the show ASAP. And I mean, we got a little bit of a history and pretty good friends and stuff over the last couple of years. So I didn't figure it was going to be too hard to get you on the show.
Yeah. For sure.
It's just a matter of nailing down time because you're a busy man. So for those people who don't know who Jeff Liskay is, that's been living under a rock for the last 20 years, tell us who you are, Jeff, and how you got started in this game.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, like all good anglers, or what I consider really like iconic fly anglers, we all start out with conventional gear, and I'm sure you do too. And then that's our base roots where we are. And I still conventional gear fish now myself. But it's just a good building blocks to understand fishery. And then eventually picked up a fly rod, started chasing some trout up in the Michigan trout streams. And then, of course, I bumped into the migratory species that are migratory trout, which we call steelhead. And then we have a salmon program. They were all hatchery that were introduced into Lake Michigan to get rid of the alewife problem. And then next thing I know, like probably just like you, when you caught your first one, it's like, I really want to do this more and more and more. So inevitably I gravitated to, using conventional gear, fishing for migratory species, then branched off into fly fishing and then started branching into warm water fishing. And now currently 12 months a year, I'm usually guiding for something, maybe a little downtime like you in January or maybe February. But other than that, whatever is around my geographic area, I try to really stay on the cutting edge of like, what can I catch with a fly rod next, and what's available. And I'm pretty blessed that, people don't realize that, the Rust Belt in and around the Great Lakes area here, within about an 8-hour drive, I can almost catch anything that swims and chase them with the fly rods, which is pretty cool. Even salmon, which we can probably talk about later. But that's how I sort of got started, And looking back now, 40 some years later, it's like, oh man, that was a pretty crazy ride, and I'm still riding the wave, man.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Now you touched on the migratory fish thing. Are you more drawn to migratory fish, specifically? Like steelhead themselves, like out of the salt water? Is that your real passion, or you just like catching just about anything? Like, what's your real passion? Is it the migratory fish? And if it is, what's that?
I think that was, and I think that's still my building blocks. I love chasing them, and but I will say, Dave, I think it's like any angler. It's always like, what's around the next corner? That next run, what's over there, what's over in the next valley. But I think I enjoy now more the adventure of going someplace different and then trying to find the magic key that makes those fish eat, or find the magic key where these fish really are living. In migratory species, as you know, you could have 200 miles or 200 kilometers of river and only have 20 of it that's really good fishing. So I still like that part of it, but I do like the adventure part. And of course, camaraderie, meeting guys like you. How can you beat it? We share the same passion and we're miles apart, Yeah,
and I mean, we would never be friends if it wasn't for fishing. I mean, fishing what's brought us together. We met in Ohio at Jerry Darkins' event, Castapalooza there. Jerry invited me down. And it's like the people that I met there were just absolutely fantastic. And I've built amazing friendships with a lot of them that I met there. And the group of guys that you guys have there are so experienced and passionate about the sport. It's definitely not about the catching of the fish with you guys. I've seen that in a very, very short period of time. I met a couple mutual friends of ours, Jerry Darkins, I already mentioned, and Steve Madewell. Met them up in Labrador. I was actually guiding them, and they were on a trip. And I learned very quickly that these guys were diehard fishermen. They were dedicated to the sport of fly angling, particularly, and they were there because they were just like-minded individuals. They weren't there to catch more from the next guy. And I quickly realized when I got to Ohio that that whole group of people, that whole network of people that I met were all that way. And it was really amazing to meet people that just shared such a passion, and they're so far away. They're fishing different fish than me, but it's the same real passion. It's in the blood. It's not something you want to do. It's something that you have to do. You agree with that?
Yeah. It's like the fly fishing village that we all share globally is actually pretty small. It really is. And if you're in it long enough, like me and you both, eventually you cross paths or hear of somebody's name, and then you're like, see what cool they got going on, from if they're iconic fly angler, fly tire, to a caster, to just a off the grid type of fishery that they're, guiding or just hosting or whatever. So it's pretty cool, man. But we're all here to help each other. That's, I think, the cool thing, and share.
Yeah, like starting this endeavor with the Guide Shack Chronicles, it's put me in contact, particularly over the last week, since the pilot series aired with Oliver White. Some really amazing people I've talked to that share so much passion. And when you start mentioning other names, oh yeah, I know him. I met him at a show. I don't really know him, but yeah, like he's doing some great stuff up there. You should call this guy. He's doing some great stuff on redfish and all this. And it's a small group of people, but it's very tight knit, and everybody knows everybody. And I noticed that a lot of cross promotion sort. It's going really well down there for a lot of people during this pandemic, and I think a lot of people really tightly knitted their networking over socially, such as stuff like this and some of the seminars that have been going on, and that's really drawn the fishing community closer again on a world list. So there's some great stuff going on, and I'm glad that everybody's helping me out with this, and it's been a lot of fun. But back to you, like I want to know, like you're doing some cool stuff out in the middle of the Great Lakes, like it's almost like flats fishing, like from what you told me. Tell us a little bit about that. Like that's some crazy stuff.
Yeah, so it's like if you find a new piece of water. But so when you live in and around the Great Lakes, and we have 5 of them, and I live right on the shores of Lake Erie my whole life. And like anything else, you start out catching these species with gear and trolling or whatever it means to be. Back in the I'll go back as far as the old contour trolling with Buck Perry spoons. But now I'm chasing all these species, warm water species and cold water species, with a fly rod out on the Great Lakes. And Dave, it's pretty funny because you can compare it to saltwater fishing. You have to have some skill set. And you have to be able to cast a little bit of a distance. You got to be able to cast into the wind. We're fishing off of in and around 21-foot boats that can handle some really big seas. Anywhere up to 3 to 5 footers is more like an average blow day for us. But we can find places to like hide behind the wind, and there's islands. But what's really cool about the Great Lakes and all the areas is that it's like this untold story of like, I can go out 25 miles out and find places that I can, get on the flats and wade and fish for carp or wade fish for drum. I can get out there and drift across a reef that's a 1/4 mile long, that's 8 foot deep, and sight fish for all sorts of species of fish. We do have, conservation issues. Some of our populations are down in some of the species in some of the areas I fish, which I feel I'm probably just a part of it for not taking advantage of, like, speaking my piece and protecting it a little more. But like every place else, we're going to try. But it's a great fishery. We're fishing for muskies up on Lake St. Clair. And, if we wanted to even, what I'd like to say to you too is, besides this warm water fishery, a lot of people don't realize we got this like great landlocked Atlantic salmon program up on St. Mary's River. But Let me ask you a question. Like, I always get this: is the Atlantic salmon still the pinnacle of fly fishing? Like, is that like the base roots? Like, that's always what I've put myself up to. But I think it's sort of changed a little bit. But what are you thinking on that? Like,
Well, Atlantic salmon's always been the pinnacle of the sport fishery. It's been known as the king of all sports fish, and I think a lot of that dates back, Jeff, to when back in the English days, when the kings and all the rich people in England owned all the private water, and in order to fish, you had to be rich, or they had to let you fish their water. So I guess that was kind of like the forbidden fruit. So I guess it was kind of, mystical back then. And then it just kind of gravitated to 1800s when people started fishing here. It was always more for sustenance for the people that actually lived here. But now I would have to say it's still the big mystical fish, because a lot of people don't get to fish them in their fishing career, because there's only so many places you can fish them. In terms of North America, up here where I'm at in Atlantic Canada, is pretty much the only place where you can catch wild Atlantic salmon, which is a difference from the landlocked salmon that you speak of. It's kind of like a migratory rainbow versus a steelhead. They still migrate, but they're using lakes and they're using the rivers to spawn in, or they're using big reservoirs up in like Labrador and places like that. But yeah, I think now, man, honestly, I think the big mystical thing now is really turning towards saltwater. Like for me, it's kind of, I'm kind of biased because I've got to catch Atlantic salmon all my life. That's been my fish that I've pursued more than anything else. But like for me, dude, man, the Seychelles, giant trevallies, like that's what I want to reach out there and grab, right? If you don't, if that doesn't rattle your bones, man, something like that their heads are sticking out when they're grabbing your fly, and they're so big and so aggressive. Like, I think the world's kind of switched, in my opinion, more saltwater for the ambiance fishing. But there's still a lot to be said for Atlantic salmon. One thing's for sure: salmon do not live in ugly places. Everywhere's up here that we fish for Atlantic, man, it's beautiful, pristine waters, rivers that flow freely. It's all public water, so you're not competing against top pools that you can't even get to. Everything's open for everybody. It's first come, first served basis. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, maybe that's the reason why too. Is like I decided to do the big water game. Just because I want to go saltwater, but I don't live on the salt, so I'm sort of doing the same thing, pushing the envelope of fishing up in 18 inches of water, sight fishing for one fish at a time, or fishing, out off the edges of the reef, just like you would saltwater fishing with long casts. And, either the fly's got a vertical jig or the fly's got to move back and forth, so it's just, I think it's the same thing. I'm trying to live that same, vibe, but just do it through the freshwater thing.
Are you doing any topwater stuff out there? Like, are you getting much topwater action seasonally, or is it mostly all drop rigs and stuff?
Actually, it's pretty cool. I can fish the topwater poppers, of course, for the bass and for the pike, and occasionally for the muskie, but a lot of times just subsurface. And the cool thing about a lot of warm water fish, just like even the catfish, these big channel cats, people envision a channel cat as a bottom dwelling, eating stuff off the bottom. In reality, they're in the top predator chain in the top 10 feet of the water most of the time. Even if they're in 30 foot, they're in the top, and they mow down chicken feathers, and they fight like crazy. So it's like, other than screwing your flies up because they trash them so bad, that's about the only drawback of catching big cats, or, chasing carp up, 20-pound carp up on a flat. So, I mean, I think that's the same vibe there too.
But do you need pretty flies to catch the carp and to catch the catfish, or can you like literally just tie a bunch of chicken feathers on and cast it out? So if the fly gets ruined, it doesn't matter. Or?
I think you always got to have those what I call a control fly. So you got to have somebody, one of the guys or yourself, somebody always fishing a fly like it's your go-to fly. And I'm sure you've got 2 or 3 or 4 of them yourself, but I've got a couple base patterns, but I usually start out with something that if I want, because I'd prefer to like see the fish eat. I would much rather do that. But sometimes,
Yeah.
we do have to like drop it down a little bit. So a heavy weighted clouser that in different variations. But so a lot of times I'll have like variations of colors. So basically, I've noticed over the last 5 years cultivating this whole system that these warm water species are very color conscious. I don't know about the Atlantics, but there are a few key colors that if I put that on, I can almost target that species and maybe and not say eliminate, but draw my chance to catch that species a little better. For instance, like a drum, you either go maybe an orange or you go like a purple chartreuse. If it ain't, like we always talk about, if it ain't chartreuse, it's no use.
It ain't
Like you probably,
chartreuse.
right?
It ain't no use. Oh man, chartreuse is on every line. This is just a few flies I tied here in the last couple days, but every fly on there, every one of them has chartreuse, whether it's crystal flash or whether it's chenille wool or whatever. But I can't think of really any Atlantic salmon fly that I fish now that hasn't been rendered to at least take chartreuse in some sort. So like a blue charm, like a traditional blue charm doesn't have chartreuse in it. Like it has a yellow butt and then just the wing. Well, now I put a chartreuse butt. I'll put chartreuse crystal flash tail instead of golden pheasant crest because, after the first or second fish, the golden pheasant crest is torn off anyway. So it's kind of superfluous to even put it there.
Right? Yeah.
So I just put crystal flash and it's like a better retractor, and then always crystal flash in either an underwing or an overwing. So it doesn't have to be much either. It's just there for contrast. It's not there to bulk up the wing or anything like that. But chartreuse definitely, and I can't think of a fly that I fish now that I don't put chartreuse in it.
Yeah, that's
in the summer. In the summer, fall,
Okay.
different story. Like touch on flies a little bit. Like I just brought some here because I know we want to compare steelhead and salmon a little bit, but like that's an intruder. Purple and black, kind of hard to see here, but purple and black intruder, and then that's a blue intruder. I think though I agree that both those would probably be good for steelhead.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't fish either of those at all in the summertime here.
Okay.
But in the fall, hold on to the cork with those. And in the summertime, we'll start off with wet flies, like that's a Undertaker. Pretty small fly tied on a Tiemco 799. Most of the flies we'll fish will be like 8s and 10s, some 6s if we get a bump in water. But then as water levels get down, we'll go right down as small as these little things. Like these are number 10 green machines. So they're tied with deer hair. They don't sink. There's no weight on them or anything like that. So they're just subsurface. So, it's almost like you're almost skating the fly because it's just under subsurface. Generally, you'll see the takes, but that's the big difference with Atlantic salmon. Like two totally different flies from the fall to the summer months, and a lot more surface once the water temperature gets warmer around first part of July or something like that. We'll start getting most of our fish on dry flies. Anybody wants to fish a fish that takes dry flies, it's just absolutely amazing. It's definitely the Atlantic salmon. That could be where the pinnacle could be today. For the difference would be the dry fly takes and the acrobatics, but it's you don't get that in the fall time. Is there a big difference with steelhead? Like for those who don't know, I've only ever caught one steelhead in my life, and Jeff was actually the guy that got it for me. We were fishing the Grand River in Ohio, and he was like, "Oh, dude, like you gotta just take my rod. It's all set up." He says, "You got the perfect, that's the right fly." And I was like, "Okay." And we were there with Rick Kustich. Rick Kustich. I always say his name wrong. I apologize, Rick, if you're watching. But yeah, and we just, I rolled that out there. You said he should be laying right out there. And man, it wasn't too cast. You knew your stuff. You knew that fish was there. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, like is there a difference between summer flies and winter flies? Is there a difference between the migratory rainbow you're fishing in the Great Lakes versus saltwater steelhead that you're fishing in BC and Alaska?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Dave. They're two totally different fish, and I'm sure you could attest fishing for wild fish. They name my area Steelhead Alley, but reality, if they would have named it Rainbow Trout Alley, we'd have every fly angler across the globe coming here. But and we still have a lot of destination. But so it's the water temperature, and like everybody realizes that how many years does that fry spend in the river before it goes to freshwater, saltwater. Your fish they're wild fish. They're looking up. They're eating mosquitoes all summer. We have hatchery fish that basically get stocked, and then they immediately go out within like a couple of months of being stocked. So they never really get that looking up, buggy, trouty thing. To give you an idea, for me to catch one of our fish in the Great Lakes on a dry fly, I could spend as much as a week to get one. Like a good year for me would be, I'd say anywhere from 1 to maybe 6 a year on a dry fly. Now you go to British Columbia or you go to Alaska where these fish are wild, where, they've spent as much as 4 or 5 years in the freshwater before hitting the salt. These fish are looking up just like your Atlantics, and they're super, super trouty. They're looking up, and they will come to the dry. But just like you, so one thing that I'll do too, we can maybe see here, probably can't, maybe how's that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
Yep. So sort of like you're talking chartreuse, but if you look at the tail, that little tuft of orange floral fiber, that sort of is just like the tail gunner, when you're, because I'm assuming that you're doing a dead drift more than a skate, where
That's
steelhead, we're doing the whole skate thing, and a lot of times we'll hitch it if we're using a tube, if we're using a big tube, if the water using, a tube like this. And then if you look at the back, we're just melting the tube and we're actually hitching it off the bottom of the tube to skate it. But the cool thing about it is, regardless, is those wild fish will, they'll come to the eat. But, you probably don't have the angling pressure that is in British Columbia and Alaska. So these fish do get pushed down a little bit, for dry fly. So sometimes you're like, oh, they don't want the dry today. Well, it is just there's jet boats and just traffic running around and other anglers rafting, working that same water. But just before first water, unmolested fish, and then evening time, super fishy time to be catching these wild fish, man. Excellent time.
Now, talk about first thing and last thing. Steelhead, will they move into the shallows? Like first thing in the morning, like my opinion, if you're fishing Atlantic salmon and you're the first guy, and maybe even the second guy or girl going down through the pool, dude, you shouldn't even be getting your feet wet. If you're getting your feet wet, you're already spooking fish, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's sort of the same rule of thumb, man. If you're fishing on molested water, first guy stepping through, man, his boots aren't wet, maybe just enough to get the shoelaces wet. And he's fishing that inside curb lane. And, springtime, up in the Skeena system, those fish are getting pushed right to the shallow gravel bars. You got a lot of predators, man. You got seals coming up, pushing them into the shallows. They don't want to be down in the gut. But, in the fall time with a lot of pressure, these fish sometimes do get pushed to mid-river or water levels. It's interesting is the cultivation between my streams, which are runoff streams, and the British Columbia streams are the same way. They react the same way. If it looks like rain or snow, they get chalked up and get dirty. So these fish sort of like forget they got molested for a few days, and then they redistribute, and then they get super grabby again. So you're
Atlantic are the same way.
Are they? Do your water get dirty or no?
It can, yes. Okay. Particularly in Nova Scotia, it can. Newfoundland, you got to get a pretty good rain to get it dirty. It will get dirty, but not like muddy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'm assuming steelhead are the same way. The minute that water level starts to recede and drop, and the minute it starts to clean, that's game on for Atlantics. Is steelhead the same?
The same, yeah, Dave. They push when the water gets all chalked up and dirty. They push right to the banks, because they don't want all that particulates in their gills. So the water clears from the edges first. They pound against the bank. So we're literally making maybe a cast just with the head of the line out. And then as the water clears, they start moving on that couchy inside seam water, probably like yours, you
Yeah.
know. And then eventually when it gets super low and clear, they'll park out in the middle of the run because they just don't have the water to park on the curb lane inside anymore. So yeah, then at that point it's time to, like, you know, unleash the McCracken and start bombing out big casts, you know. So
Yeah.
other than that, it's, you know, start in close and get those fish right in tight. So, and they're super grabby too.
And do you notice too with steelhead in a traditional pool, like, you know, your long, narrow, deep gut with a nice tail out and a nice head. Do the steelhead typically lay higher in the pool in high water and the tail in the lower water? Like, that's typically what steelhead will do too?
You know, so one thing I notice is let's just divide that whole up into three parts: the head, the gut, and the tail, right?
Yep.
Generally speaking, you'll never find them in all three spots.
Correct.
So, you know, they'll only be in like two out of the three. But then as the water gets high, is I usually consider, like, even for when I'm fishing for Atlantics, is a fish's territory. So for a steelhead, when the water gets super high, you can't lay in the head because there is no head. It's just coming through there like, you know, rip roaring, jerking. And then the gut is almost unfishable because there's just no seam. And then the tail out still got some, you know, there's really no defined tail out. Where the next thing is, if everybody knows the rivers that have a whole bunch of, when the river makes the turns, when the water gets super high, steelhead will lay on the flats between the two holes where it's nice, and or the inside like soft turns, but they'll lay on those flats. And then as the water recedes, they'll come back into their, you know, I call them their home turf. So this could be 3/4 of a mile, you know, for their home, what I call home territory. So from high water to low water, you know, one big giant steelhead that I'm chasing could have 3/4 of a mile of river. That's
Yeah.
what he calls home because it's everything he needs, you know.
Yeah. See, salmon are different because they're are steelhead, like a true steelhead. How long will they spend in that home territory?
You know, that's a
If the
great.
water level conditions are good.
They'll spend in different sections, but eventually, as they near the spawn, they have to get into their natal waters and get towards their spawning grounds. But before that, you know, I did some, you know, pit tagging, radio tracking. And what I did find out, and what we did find out, and what I've caught in my short little time that I was able to do it, is that the steelhead are just like us, Dave. They have different personalities. Some are runners that just like to go like a son of a bitch up the river, and some are like lazy. And then there are some big barroom bullies, the big males. They'll just hunker down in the gut of a pool and just take it over until he's ready to do whatever, or wait for a female to come up. So there is no rhyme or reason. I think that Mother Nature protecting them. But there are ones that run and one that sort of lag their tail a little bit too.
Yeah. I don't see that so much in or the rivers that I guide on in Newfoundland, because they're spate rivers. So
Yeah.
the fish, you know, they're coming in with one thing on their mind. They're going right to as far up as they can go. So like today you get them here, the next day they're going up, and they just continue going. For the most part, you don't get what I consider a lot of lower river spawners. So they're heading right up to the big still waters, which are usually sanctuary. You can't fish up there, which are many miles up. But yeah, like I don't think the salmon hang out for any length of time in the rivers that I'm on. Now, up in Quebec and some of the bigger rivers up there, like the Grand Cascapedia, like there's big pools, like those are holding pools. Like there's fish come into those and they'll stay there all summer. I don't get that in the rivers where I'm at. Like I said, it's a cool little piece of heaven where I'm at. You know, I got 9 rivers there total, but 5 that I target predominantly. And like I said, they're all spate rivers. They're all susceptible to water conditions, and that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. You're getting fresh fish coming all the time when the fish run is on and you got good water conditions. So, you know, the fish that you fished yesterday, if you're fishing in the same area or the same section of the river, chances are the fish that are going to be there tomorrow are going to be fresher than the ones that you fished yesterday, because, you know, they're just going and then the next group's coming. So that kind of adds to it. And that's one thing that draws me to the migratory fish is the uncertainty of knowing whether or not they're going to be there. Like I guided up in Labrador at some of them renowned camps up there, and the fishing's absolutely phenomenal. But for the most part, we as guides, we had names for all the trout because you caught the same trout every week. Like you go to the pool, and you know, for the next month, the water conditions stayed the same, so the trout stayed in the same places. And you know, you caught Fred with the scar from the fish hawk down his left side that, you know, it looked like the mark on Harry Potter's forehead or something. Like, you know, oh look, you take a picture, and oh look, it's Fred again, right? You don't get that with Atlantics, with wild Atlantics anyway, because they're, you know, they're moving all the time. So, but the downside of that, Jeff, and I'm sure you know from fishing steelhead and the migratory rainbows that you're fishing on your home waters too, you're susceptible to that migration. If the fish aren't there yet, there's nothing you can do. You have to wait for the fish to come into the river. And, you know, when they do, everything's great. You know, as long as you got water conditions and they keep coming, perfect. But to that migration, and I don't know if it affects steelhead even on the West Coast. I don't think it would affect them as much as it does us for the Atlantics. But if we get a lot of easterly wind all spring and the ice stays blown in on the Labrador coast and between Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's all iced in, Atlantic salmon won't swim under ice. So that ice, till we get westerly winds to blow that ice offshore, you're not getting any salmon. And I've been in one of the best places in the world to fish Atlantic salmon up in Labrador. You know, it was the second week of July before we even started seeing fish, and they've been in the third week of June. So there was a lot of disappointed anglers, but you know, there was nothing we could do. Now, when that ice did blow out and the fish did come, the guys that were in camp the next 2 weeks, they had some of the best fishing that they ever had, and they will never, probably ever have fishing that again. So it's one of them things. It's crapshoot. You know, you go on 10 fishing trips in 10 years in a row. Realistically, dude, if you hit it bang on twice, that's like winning the lottery. You know, the other 5 times it's going to be, you know, okay fishing, and then you're going to have, you know, then a couple of years that are going to be total bust, and that's fishing, right? And that's why you keep coming back, or you keep going back to wherever it is that you go. And if you trust the odds and you like the waters, keep going back, and eventually you're going to hit good fishing.
Yeah, that's about the ratio. I usually say that, you know, for British Columbia, they're just like your fish. They're summer run steelhead that migrating up could be 700 kilometers upstream to their natal waters. You just got to get them to slow down in the main stem, or when they're working through their natal waters, you got to get them to slow down enough so you can catch them. You can't catch running fish, like you said. And then if you can let them park for a while, you can catch them. But, you know, in my neck of the woods, those spate rivers, it's the same thing. You know, we have a little probably better catch ratio and more consistency. But if we don't have water, they don't come in. And if we got too much water, you can't fish for them. You know, it's probably not 1 to 10 like it is destination fishing. You know, like I would have to say that's what it is for BC, 1 out of every 10, 7 trips. And then once you get it, though, you'll come back the next 9. That's for sure, like I said. But around the area, I have to say the Great Lakes, I'd say probably every 3rd or 4th trip, you know, you're going to get a trip where you're like, you know, this is pretty spectacular fish. Just like I'm struggling to get a fish. You know, that report card gripping grin that we all guides have to get. I think that's our grading. It's like, oh yeah, no one wants to hear, oh, I went for a great boat ride with Jeff or a great, you know, wade trip with Dave. They want to say, what'd you catch, a big Atlantic salmon? They're like, no, I went for a boat ride.
Well, a boat ride with Jeff Liskay wouldn't be all that bad.
No, yeah.
You're pretty good company, so.
Yeah, a lot of entertaining.
So what do you got on the go right now, Jeff? I know you guys had a freeze up there. Is there any fishing on the go there now?
Yeah, you know, what's interesting, Dave, is that just when you think you got your home waters figured out, Mother Nature throws a monkey wrench in. So we have these extremely mild falls and winter, and we had an absolutely spectacular fall fishery. These fish came in, and normally they have to winter over. Because of mild temperatures in November, they spawned and they exited. And I'm like, okay. And then we got a little cold snap, and next thing you know, we've got another run. We had another run of fish to like maybe 4 to 6 pounds, and we started pursuing those. And we're like, this is going to be like one of those another mild winters. And then we got the door slammed within the single digits and teens. The rivers froze over, and they just broke open about over the weekend. I'd have to say this weekend was a legit breaking open. So now we're sort of waiting for them to recede. And it was a mild break open, just like you say, the ice. Our rivers are extremely volatile with like big ice chunks coming down the river, and these fish sometimes actually get pushed way out of the system and down to get just because they don't want to get ground up from all the ice coming down the rivers. But I'm
Right.
looking forward to a good spring season, some holdovers now. And then we'll get going here on Steelhead probably midweek. And then that'll continue all the way through probably the last week of May. And then we turn over to warm water stuff.
Yep. You got any openings in case anybody's looking?
Oh, absolutely, man. We can always fit you in. Steelhead fishing, that's been my forte, and I'm sort of forging ahead with this Great Lakes fly fishing thing I got going on. And we've always got plenty of room because people need to understand, just like saltwater fishing, that you might need to come at least more than once to improve your skill set of casting. And just like your first time tarpon fishing, you're most certainly not going to get the job done. And the same
No.
thing goes with this, man. You're going to go out there and you're going to struggle with the wind, but I guarantee you'll have a good adventure, get a few shots of some fish, maybe land some fish, but your next time out, it's going to be pretty cool. So we got lots of openings, and we do that all the way to the end of August. And maybe
You
even
do fly casting instruction too, correct?
I do two-handed and single-handed, and that's sort of the way I like to base things, Dave. I think any good guide, they evaluate their customer skill set, and then you don't want to be badgering them all the time, like do this, but you could just give them a little points of like, hey, let's do this casting, let them absorb that later, then give them another little tidbit to help and work on, and then by the end of the day, you can watch their improvement, and then of course they feel more confident, as the day goes on too.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like I've seen so many guys show up, like Atlantic salmon. A lot of the guiding that I've done, especially in my younger years, was a lot of corporate stuff. Like they would be like a corporation, and they would bring a bunch of their guests with them, and it would be 10 guys for the week that never held a fly rod in their hand before. It's frustrating guides sometimes because we really want to see people catch fish. Like you said earlier, you want all your clients to get that rip and grin shot. So, but what's so satisfying is when you see that person at the first day one that doesn't know which way to hold that fly rod, and at the end of the week, they're putting out 30, 40 feet of line on an average wind condition day and catching fish. So, you've done way more than just get them that fish. You've probably now introduced them to fly fishing, and as Oliver White said in my last episode, if more kids fish, the world would be a better place. And if more people had to start fishing when they were kids, there'd be more people fishing today. I would love to see more people fishing, just not on my waters.
Yeah, that's great. So generally speaking, my rule of thumb, Dave, is sort of like, your skill set sometimes won't equate to like maybe your expectations of catching the fish. So like just say chasing a muskie on a fly rod. If you cannot be a proficient double haul caster in cover water, your chances are going to be a lot slimmer when you're only casting 30 feet, 35 feet compared to 60 or 80 feet. It's all about covering water, and it's just a very frustrating game. And the more water you can cover, the more chances you're going to have to get a muskie. So it's just that name of the game.
Now, you prefer muskies for your warm water fish?
I do not. No.
No?
They're cool fish. You get a lot of visuals, but it's like Heartbreak Ridge, man. You get so many follows, and it's really engaging fishing, but it's a large fly, 9 weight plus rods, the long days. But when you finally get one, you're like, okay, it's almost like it's like, I call it the check the box fish. because a lot of anglers will check the box, they caught their muskie, but then they'll move on to like saltwater or something else. But personally, I just like to go out and see what the day unfolds. So I might be going out for smallmouth bass, and then they're just not cooperating, and I might end up the day chasing, some type of bowfin or who knows what. That's the way I roll. Just whatever Mother Nature and the day allows me to fish for. That's sort of what I like to do.
Yeah, you're pretty well. You got a very diverse fishery there, so you can do that. Like for me, the rivers predominantly have Atlantic salmon in them, some choke, but here our striper fishery, that's a little different. If somebody comes for a day fishing striped bass with me, we have American shad in the river as well. There is chance that we do have sturgeon. They don't really take fly, and we're not allowed to pursue them, but they are a bycatch from time to time. And brown trout. So I can take a client fishing in the morning, big old dirty streamer fly for we got a pretty serious striped bass fishery here. There's some really big fish, so we're chucking some big flies at them, predominantly to catch the bigger ones. Bigger the bait, bigger the fish. Isn't that the way it works, Jeff?
I wish.
But then, you can, if your client, again, they're sad if the wind comes up and they're having difficulty throwing those bigger flies, I can throw them in the vehicle. We can drive 5 minutes up the road to another section of the river, and, we're fishing brown trout in the 14 to 20 inch range. So, and those are sea run browns out of the ocean. So it's, same time of year. So, it's good to have diversity. You have a whole lot more of it. Like, tell people about, like, you're catching walleye on a fly rod, dude. Like, that's unheard of to my knowledge, really.
So the inland lake impoundment walleyes and river walleyes, they're pretty aggressive. They could hit sawguy, and that they hit the fly pretty well. But Lake Erie is the walleye capital of the world. You think it'd be really easy to catch them? I tell you, it's been an uphill struggle, Dave. But I'm starting to unlock the secrets with the fly colors, the patterns, and the population is way up. So it's the low light periods that really help out. So evening, nighttime. And even the first light. And the cool thing about it is that, I'm fishing in like super shallow water on the reefs. So they're not up there just because they like the shallow water. They're up there to feed. So, and I'm starting to figure it out a little more. They like the fly that really drops a lot. So I'd have to say this last season was the first time I could say legitimately we were catching, not on a consistent basis, but we were catching a few limits of walleye on the fly. So starting to unlock that, get that key, that magic key that we're all looking for, You'll
get it. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, I hope so, man.
Persistency is the key, and you're perceptive. You want to learn, so you will learn. You're not going to go out there with the mindset that you already got it figured out. You're going to try different things all the time, get your clients to try different things. So
yeah, absolutely.
So what's Jeff Liskay got on the go in the near future? Like you said, you just had the season opening up, but any big trips coming up or anything like that, dude, or what?
COVID, I'm going to go do the Alaska thing. Our British Columbia trips are all still, put on hold. So, I'm going to lay a little low, and I'm going to keep pounding away and doing some research in my home waters, because a lot of times some of the best fishing is right in front of your nose, and you just don't explore it. But as soon as the borders opened up, I'm coming to visit David. And then of course that opens up the door to Cuba and everything else again. So I think I'm just in that holding pattern. Is the borders closed? A lot of our good warm water fishing is across the border, this imaginary border of the waters we fish, and we can't access that yet. So I think we're really fingers crossed that the borders open up and all this goes away. This whole Rona stuff goes away. So that's about it.
Yeah, hopefully with the vaccine rollout and stuff, that'll open up the borders and get everybody rolling again. I know 2020 was pretty hard on the guys up here on the northern side of the border, especially since a lot of our guests are predominantly Americans. I know 100% of my clients were Americans for 2020, so that was a bit tough, but we'll get through it.
Yep.
We'll get through it, and everybody it'll be that much more appreciated when everybody gets up here and starts doing their fishing. And same thing with me, man. Like as soon as the borders open up, I'm coming down there. You know, I want to try this flat fishing out in the middle of the Great Lakes, dude. I love fly fishing on the flats, so I haven't done it yet on freshwater, and I haven't caught a drum yet. You got me my first steelhead, and you got me my first carp on the bluff.
Well, boy,
The carp was bigger than the steelhead.
yeah, we're getting ready to do everything else, man.
Yeah, no, right on. So if anybody wants to go fishing with Jeff or wants to learn a little bit more about what you're doing there, how can they find you, Jeff?
You know, the easiest way is probably just hook me up on the website, greatlakesflyfishing.com. And there's a little box there just like you have. Just hit me up, and then we go back and forth, answer some questions, and love to have you come down and do an adventure with me, man. It'd be way cool.
Yep. No, I'll be down for sure. And for anybody looking for a great time, Jeff really is he really is the real deal. I mean, he's a great host, funny guy, and he's just really fishy. He's probably the most fishiest dude I know. And bar none, hands down, the guy that I know that wears nano puff pants more than anybody else. I'm willing to bet you got nano puff pants on right now, don't you?
I cannot confirm or deny that, Dave.
All right, Jeff. Well, it was great having you, man. And as always, keep them lines tight, dude, and keep me in the loop as to what's going on.
Thanks, David, man. You too, man. Be safe. And this was way cool chat.
All right, man.